Hi everyone, welcome to Celestial, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be talking about the very long awaited Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart. Now this has been requested through DMs, comments, messages, emails, and even our messenger on our website. And the delay was not intentional, it was just things were just getting in the way, and that is why it's taken so long to upload this video. But it's finally here and I'm very grateful for your patience. Before I get into this video, I do have to say a quick little disclaimer. I am a little bit under the weather. I sound a little bit different and you might hear me speak a little nasally or cough a little bit, or my voice may go in and out. Sometimes when I'm recording this, I just want to apologize on behalf. Just be transparent and let you know that I am a little bit under the weather, and that's why you may hear that throughout this video. I was waiting on getting better or getting over this cold before I recorded this video, but it seems like this cold or flu has become very attached and it doesn't seem like it wants to leave anytime soon, and I didn't want to keep people waiting, so here I am. Now, with Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart, I do want to have just some points on the Navamsa chart in the 7th house. Now, I'm sure you've read upon other blogs or even watched other YouTube videos where people talk about Saturn in the 7th house, especially in the Navamsa chart or in the D9 chart. I do want to preface and say that this one is going to be a little bit different, or the information that I'm going to present or suggest is going to be a little bit different, and that is intentional. I'm not so happy with the gloom and doom associated with this position, so I'm going to try to highlight more of the positives while also being realistic and practical. And of course, the Navamsa chart is an incredibly important chart. Again, if you do not have your exact birth time, then I don't advise that you look into it with too much detail. And that's because the Navamsa chart very quickly changes, so having an exact birth time becomes incredibly important to get accurate predictions and results. The Navamsa chart is also known as the height of fortune, or the chart of fortune. It represents so many different things, but again, for the sake of this video and for the sake of this series, I'm just going to talk about planets in the 7th house connected to your spouse, your marriage, or your long-term commitment. And one more quick thing, in these videos when I talk about the spouse, I don't really go into the appearance, and I certainly don't go into things like skin color. I understand that in certain cultures, or even perhaps just individual preferences, this is something that people like to know. I mean, like the color of your spouse's skin and so on. It's not something that I will go into. I just want to say that at the beginning of the video because I don't want you to listen to it in hopes that I will touch on that subject. And the reason I don't go into it is because of the world that we live in today. A lot of individuals face a lot of discrimination, grief, and suffering over something that they can't control, such as the color of their skin. And I don't want to be another individual that talks about that or the importance of it, especially when it comes to falling in love and choosing a life partner, because it is not important. When you commit to somebody or when you enter into a union with somebody, the color of their skin should be the very last thing that you think of. Instead, it should be the content of their character, who they are as a person, and what they stand for. And that all ties into having Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart. So let's officially begin this video. Now, as I said a little bit earlier, Saturn is often associated or connected to gloom and doom, and that's not necessarily the case. I have noticed that when Saturn is connected to the 7th house matter, especially when Saturn is sitting in the 7th house or it rules the 7th house, I've noticed that people get partners that are in some way connected to politics, law, or the government. And that's usually because it is the natural 10th house of status or career. Now, this does not mean that if you have Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart that you're necessarily going to marry somebody or commit to somebody that is a politician, a lawyer, or works in the government, but the chances are usually quite high, or you can find that this person has an interest in these topics and matters. Saturn represents institutions, Saturn represents traditions, things that last a very long time, and usually not with ease. When Saturn enters the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart, of course it depends on the sign it's sitting in, and it of course depends on the aspects it's receiving as well, but it usually indicates that there's some sort of very serious commitment and duty towards your partnership, your union, your marriage, and then by default your spouse or your long-term partner. Traditionally, you'll hear and see a lot of people talk about how Saturn is connected to sorrows, so then they further say that having Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart indicates that the partner brings sorrow into your life or brings grief of some kind, and that's not necessarily the case. We have to remember that we have to adjust certain definitions or translations based off of the world that we're living in today. For example, off the top of my head, Prince Harry from the royal family has Saturn in his 7th house of his D9 Navamsa chart. I believe Saturn is sitting in Pisces, and this is of course sidereal calculations. And I wouldn't necessarily say that Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, is a miserable person or his union with her is miserable. I could say that it's difficult perhaps, and there is a tremendous duty and commitment involved. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he's not happy in his marriage, or his partner is not a happy person or not a supportive person. In fact, I would say it's quite the exact opposite, especially if we use them as an example. I won't go into their synastry too much in this video. I'm actually working on an independent video where I talk about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and their synastry, and that will come out very soon. But they are a good example to use when it comes to Saturn connected to the 7th house matters, either by Meghan's chart or by Harry's chart. When you have Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart, it usually brings some sort of isolation into your life, and this is through the partner, but that doesn't necessarily mean the partner themselves is enforcing it or asking this from you. Again, if we go back to what I said earlier, because Saturn is oftentimes connected to politics or the government, authority of some kind, law, it usually indicates that if you enter into a union with this person, there's some level of isolation involved. Perhaps you have to be a little bit more distant with people that you've been very close to, or perhaps after the union and marriage, you move away to a different place, or there's distance involved somehow, and then by default, there can be isolation as well. Having Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart does not necessarily indicate rainbows and sunshine. It can be difficult, especially if your chart is more water ruled or you are a more emotional and sentimental person. Having Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart indicates that the partner is usually older than you, so there is very often an age difference. We can see this in Priyanka Chopra and Nick Jonas's synastry, with Nick having Saturn in his 7th house and Priyanka, of course, being older than him by 10 plus years. We can see this in George Clooney and Amal Clooney's synastry as well, with George Clooney's Dharkarka actually sitting with Saturn in Capricorn, and he is 17 years older than his partner. So age difference is usually very strongly connected with Saturn. If there's other aspects, then it can bring the age difference down, and it can instead indicate that there's a mentality difference present. With this placement, it usually indicates that the partner, your spouse, whoever you commit to, is somebody who is very serious, probably somebody who is a little bit jaded or used to dealing with a lot of difficulties in their life. It can indicate that your spouse or your long-term partner is somebody who has probably been greatly misunderstood at some point in their life or even throughout their life, depending on other aspects. It can also indicate that this person has a burden of some kind. Now, this burden can be connected to a wide variety of different things. It can be something with their health that is going on. It can be something with their family, or again, the reputation or status that they have in society can end up becoming a burden to them, something that they have to fulfill, even if they don't necessarily want to. Having Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart very strongly indicates that your long-term partner or your spouse is somebody that has dealt with a tremendous amount of responsibility in their life, and this is usually other people's responsibility that has been given to them and they've had to take it on. It can indicate somebody that has high authority or status in their life, especially in the professional arena. They could have a legacy, or they can come from a family that has a legacy, or you can go on to make a legacy with them through your union and partnership. This is a person who is very much no nonsense. They usually are able to see through things, and they usually don't have time to deal with the superficial things. So this is somebody that's probably going to want to commit to you very quickly, and I'm not saying in a month necessarily, but quite quickly, or you will in other ways know that they're very serious about you and your union. And Saturn here will cause distance. Again, this can be distance in age, so it can be an age difference, distance in mentality, so you can think very differently, or it can manifest as a literal physical distance, as in the relationship can be a long distance relationship as well. Or when you're in a union, when you're married to this person or in a committed relationship with them, it can mean that they are often away from you or you're away from them, and this can be due to work commitments. It's usually not due to them wanting to hang out with their friends. It's usually more so because they're navigating their responsibilities, especially when it comes to their profession. Now, if other indications in the chart are also there, sometimes it can indicate that you can end up with a partner that has been previously married, so they can be widowed or they can be divorced. Now, this is not always the case. This is usually in the most extreme circumstances, or they can be in situations where you can see that in their past that they've been in relationships where it did feel like they were in a marriage or a very serious relationship, but it had broken up, and this had significantly impacted them and probably affected the way that they see partnerships and relationships. If there are other indications in the chart, having Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart can indicate that there is a rise in your spouse's or long-term partner's life, especially in the professional space, after meeting you and after getting into a serious committed relationship with you. So you can actually trigger a rise in their life and actually bring a lot of benefit to them. Or of course, it can be vice versa as well. It can mean that this person comes from a status or background or reputation that joining into a union with them or getting into a committed relationship with them can actually further your career or bring you rise in life as well. Having Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart often indicates that the spouse or the long-term partner usually comes from a family or a background where they have seen a lot of restrictions in their life. So it's likely that this person can come across as a little bit awkward. They might not have the best social skills, but they tend to be very sincere and genuine as well. This placement usually doesn't indicate that your partner is the most exciting person on earth. They can come across as a little bit boring to some people, but they tend to be very stable and they tend to have things in order, or they at least are very aware about the path that they want to take. So they're very sure of themselves and what they want to do in life. Wherever Saturn sits in a chart usually indicates, of course, karma, but it usually brings a level of fear into that theme. So having Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart can indicate fear surrounding very solid commitments and partnerships. So it can be that your partner can be a little bit uneasy about getting into a commitment in very extreme senses. They can be known as a commitment phobe. Or they can, again, have something to do with abandonment in their partnership. So once they do commit to you, they can become incredibly attached to you, that if you show any sign of backing away from them or the relationship's not going well, it can actually severely impact them. This placement usually indicates that after you find your person, you find your spouse, your long-term partner, that they can ask you for a very serious level of commitment that you're not necessarily ready for. So sometimes this can indicate that you don't actually know what you're signing up for, especially on a karmic level. So it's advised you take things slow when you really get to know this person, and especially what their expectations are, with the key word being expectations. Now, if we go back to Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, quickly as an example, her Darakarka is very strongly conjunct Saturn and her moon, and it's in the 3rd house. And of course, we know what happened with the British media. Again, I won't get into it in this video, but she's also been famously quoted saying that she had no idea what she was getting into and what things were going to happen. And this is also an example of Saturn being very strongly involved in relationship or marriage-related matters. So having Saturn in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart can indicate that after marriage takes place, after a union takes place, that there is a tremendous level of discipline or routine or even restriction and limits that come into your life that you have to abide by going forward. And this is why I gave the politician or law and government example before, because as we know, if most people enter into a relationship with a politician, there can be tremendous amounts of restriction from what you wear to what you can say, to where you go, to who your friends are, and so on. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that these are restrictions that your partner is directly saying to you or asking from you. It can just mean that these are the themes of the marriage or the union, that this is what's expected of you just because you're getting into a relationship or a commitment with this particular individual. I've seen that those who have Saturn in the 7th house of their D9 Navamsa chart, another example that comes to mind is Kourtney Kardashian, who also has other planets as well in the 7th house, can indicate a partner who is actually immensely supportive. If we do go back to Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, and Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, I wouldn't say that him having Saturn in the 7th house of his D9 Navamsa chart indicates a cold or distant partner at all. I think these are themes that come into the 7th house or the marriage and union. In fact, I would say the exact opposite, that the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, has been incredibly supportive of the decisions that he's made, and he's also famously said that she is his rock and his greatest support. You can also see this in Kourtney Kardashian and Travis Barker's relationship or marriage. And she also says that he is her best friend and they are in their own world and he is her rock. So it actually indicates a very, very strong connection to the spouse or the long-term partner. It doesn't necessarily indicate that you're going to be in a miserable relationship and you're not going to have any support from the partner. In fact, it actually indicates the exact opposite. The partner is like an anchor to you and they're usually by your side through ups and downs and anything that comes. Now, this doesn't mean that they're necessarily expressive. I wouldn't say that their love language is words of affirmation. It may actually be acts of service instead. So this can be somebody who is probably a little bit uncomfortable expressing how they feel about you, or at least going into the depth of how they feel about you, but they can be very demonstrative. So they will do things for you, they will get you things, and this is usually the way that they show love. They might be a little bit awkward if you sit with them and want them to tell you all the reasons that they love you or care for you, but they will definitely show you. After entering into a union with them or getting married to them, you can see that a lot of duty comes into your life. We can also see this in Michelle and Barack Obama, with Michelle Obama's Atma Karaka actually being Saturn and Barack Obama's Dar Karaka being Saturn. We can see this really overtly in their relationship, in their marriage, because he was the president of the United States and their marriage was full of tremendous duty to other people, and they were essentially a team that took on that duty together. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to marry the next president of the United States or the equivalent in a different country. It can indicate that you can together take on a project or an initiative or a goal that you both deeply care for, and that brings in almost like a co-worker relationship. So it's going to be somebody that you end up working with, or at some points it can actually be somebody that you end up working for, depending on other things in the Navamsa chart as well. One, quote, remedy that you can use for this position is actually taking on a project together. It can help balance the Saturnian energy as well. If you work on something together, it can actually lessen the distance between you as well. But it usually indicates when Saturn is really well placed that your partner is somebody that may greatly respect your own work ethic or the goals that you have for your life, and they can be very supportive and do their best to help you with that as well. Having Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart, on some level, depending on the nakshatra, the lunar mansion it's sitting in, and depending on the sign that it's sitting in, of course, can indicate that your partner can be incredibly wise. So they have usually gone through a lot in their life. They can have a really good understanding of the masses of other people. So they can be really good at giving advice and even leading other people, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're fond of it. So this doesn't indicate that this person actually wants to be a leader or wants fame and attention. It just indicates that they can be very good at navigating other people and being of service to other people. Having Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart usually indicates that you get a partner that you really look up to, and it can be on various different levels. It can be because of their accomplishments, or you can really look up to who they are as a person. They can be very inspiring for you as well. You'll notice that your partner likely has had a lot of issues with authority figures in their life somehow. Now, this can be their teachers in school, it can even be their parents, it can be their bosses, but there's almost always some sort of issue with authority in their life and even throughout their life. Having Saturn in the 7th house can also indicate that there can be a health issue that comes up with your spouse or long-term partner, so you almost have to be of service to them at a certain point in your life. It can be throughout, but it almost is usually an old age, so you actually might have to take care of them or make sure that they're doing okay. You may have to dedicate a lot of your time to them and to this relationship and marriage. And this can also go back into when I said that having Saturn in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart can bring a level of isolation into your life. So it can be through a variety of different things. It can be because this person is high status or comes from a background or professional arena that requires you to be a little bit more distant with other people. There can be restrictions, or it can also be that the partner falls sick or there's something going on with their health that requires you to isolate yourself more so you can be more dedicated to them, and then by default your marriage or your union. Now, if you're very Saturnian yourself, so if you have a lot of Capricorn placements, to some extent you have a lot of Aquarius placements, Saturn in your first house, if Saturn is your Atma Karaka, sitting with your sun, moon, and so on, it can actually indicate that you get a partner who is a lot like you, and you may think alike very much, so it can actually indicate that you get along very well with your partner, and your partner kind of becomes your safe spot, somebody that you feel like you can be your most authentic self with, and they're completely non-judgmental, and they can be very supportive of you as well. You'll notice that your spouse or your long-term partner is tremendously hardworking. So this can be somebody that works quite a lot, or if they're not working, if they're at home with you, this is somebody that thinks a lot about work or can also bring their work into the home with you. Your partner is likely to be somebody that has a routine that is very disciplined. And again, discipline can be in many different ways. They can be, of course, physically disciplined, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, even financially very disciplined. And this is likely to be somebody that is extremely attached to you or extremely close to you. And this is usually because your partner, your spouse, your long-term partner is not somebody that is a social butterfly or very open with other people. In fact, it can be the exact opposite. It can take a very long time for this person to open up to other people, because just like Saturn has rings around it, your partner also has these kind of rings around them. It's not very easy to get close to them. It's not very easy for other people, at least, to get close to them. But once you're in, then the rings kind of surround you. So that's where the isolation can come in, and they can also be incredibly attached to you and very protective of you as well. You'll notice that your partner is somebody that likes to do the right thing. They can have a lot of integrity. And you'll notice that people who wrong them will often face a lot of karma, and then by default, this will also come on to you. So it's highly advised that you don't cheat them out of anything, you don't backstab them, you don't lie, because the karma will be immensely strong. But it also comes on to you as a protective force, as in if other people try to harm you or do you wrong, karma will also get them very quickly, and this is through your relationship, through your partner or your spouse. You'll notice with Saturn in the 7th house of the D9 Navamsa chart, your partner is somebody that's incredibly into traditions, and this can be in certain cultures, the traditions involved in the marriage or the union, or it can also be somebody that's just very traditional. So somebody who wants to have Sunday morning breakfast every Sunday and they insist on it, or there's certain family traditions that they want to keep going. They're very traditional, they're very big on duty, they're incredibly hardworking, and they tend to be very resilient people who've seen a lot of suffering in their life, whether they've experienced it themselves, and this is usually the case, or they've seen it through other people, and they become very, very kind-hearted, though they may not show this to other people very easily. Having the presence of Saturn in your 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart usually indicates that this is going to be a long-term relationship, unless, of course, there's other things at play. It usually indicates that it's going to be a relationship that in other ways is very difficult to get out of. So if you do get married or get into a union with them, if you want to divorce because of other reasons or other things happening in synastry, then it can be a very long and drawn out kind of struggle to get out of the relationship. So you have to be very careful of who you commit to and make sure you know who they really are as a person. If the Saturn is really well placed and there's other positive aspects, it can indicate that your spouse is somebody that is your very best friend. This is probably somebody that you want to escape the rest of the world from. You probably feel a tremendous connection to them. You're incredibly close, and you can feel like this person really understands you and is really patient with you in a way that perhaps nobody else has ever been. And this can go both ways. Your spouse or your long-term partner can also feel this way about you, and thus this indicates a very strong attachment and connection. Your spouse or your long-term partner is somebody that is tremendously loyal, honest. They have a lot of integrity. They're very hardworking. They're very dutiful people, not just to you, but to their other relationships as well, even though they may not have very many. This is somebody that other people rely on very strongly because they're an anchor to other people. They can be an inspiration or an example to other people as well. Your spouse and long-term partner can come from a very strong and powerful legacy or background. They can also even become like a mentor to you, a guide to you. That can be your greatest teacher, and they can help you really navigate your life and difficulties. This can be somebody, again, that you really heavily rely on and you're tremendously close to, for better or for worse. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video. It's actually quite long. I didn't want to make it this long, but a lot of people have been waiting a very long time, so I thought I would add in a little extra information. Especially, I wanted to go towards information that other people don't necessarily speak of. So yes, I could have talked about more about the age difference or how Saturn delays but never denies, but I feel like that's said so many times that it'd be a little bit redundant for me to make a video repeating the same thing. So I wanted to go into more information and different types of information and present that to you. Before you go, I do want to talk about one really important thing that's happening, so don't click off quite yet. I'm sure some of you are aware of what's happening in the world right now, specifically what is happening in Gaza. There is a genocide happening in Gaza. There's ethnic cleansing happening of the Palestinian people. The Israeli government has cut off all food, water, fuel, energy, and telecommunications in Gaza. This is starving the Palestinian people, and they've begun the massacre of the beautiful and resilient Palestinian people. It's becoming increasingly difficult for us to know what is happening in Gaza because of this blackout. Now, Gaza is the largest open-air prison in the world. This population of 2.2 million people are mostly children, and these are people that are having now their homes, their refugee camps, hospitals, schools all bombed. The Israeli government is using white phosphorus, which is a legal chemical, and it is actually banned internationally. They have committed tremendous amounts of war crimes. At this point, it's uncountable. And the Israeli government is refusing to ceasefire, even though there has been tremendous calls from the international community calling on them to ceasefire. There's been votes. They refuse to take this on, and they refuse to listen to anybody. They're continuing their war crimes, and they are effectively destroying Gaza completely. They're doing this in the name of self-defense, but if you, like I have, seen these pictures and videos circulate, you would know that this is not self-defense. Gaza does not have an army, they don't have a navy, they don't have an air force, they don't have any military budget. There is no way for them to actually defend themselves in any way whatsoever, especially against Israel, which is known for their defense, it's known for their military and all the funding that they get from the Western powers. I know not a lot of people in the spiritual community are talking about this, and a lot of people in general who have platforms are not talking about this because of the contracts that they have signed. But I feel like we have a duty to our family and humanity to talk about what's happening and continue to demand a ceasefire and international humanitarian aid for the people of Palestine. Innocent human beings have a right to feel safe regardless of their religion, gender, nationality, or actions of their government. Innocent people from any country, state, province, or city do not deserve to be engulfed in the crossfire of various political agendas. The Israeli government must end its systemic dispossession and oppression of the Palestinian people, and the Israeli government must be held responsible for what it has done to the people of Palestine. Again, a large chunk of this population are mainly children, and children are not anybody that you should fear. They do not require you to unleash and offload bombs onto their homes and their family members. We cannot make compassion, empathy, care, and basic human decency conditional. We cannot let our leaders say that because they didn't speak out for us or because this person didn't do this, that we will not do it for them. That is not the meaning of humanity. That is not what the meaning of life is. Those in power who've refused to offer aid should be ashamed of themselves. We cannot excuse or allow selective recognition. This means that we cannot just choose what we want to give attention to or what we want to speak in support of. Every human being on earth should be in support of a ceasefire. Every human being on earth should be in support of protecting children, regardless of where they are from. I want to state that all the proceeds that Celestial makes, whether they're in the form of consultations, books, products, or even donations, will be directly donated to emergency aid funds that are helping Gaza and the people of Palestine. We will be doing this at least until the end of 2023, if not longer. This also means that I will be donating any earnings that I make, along with the other astrologers at Celestial, the students, the interns, the volunteers, will all be teaming up to donate their earnings and profits to help the people of Palestine. If you don't know what's happening, especially in the era and the times that we're living in today, where there's so much knowledge available, there's so many incredible human beings that are offering their teachings to you for free, I strongly urge you to please listen to them. Please get your news and your information from trusted sources, verified sources. If nothing else, the least we can do is witness and speak up for what is happening. I strongly urge you to engage in dialogues and have conversations about what is happening in the world. I know in the spiritual community, in the astrological community, there's a lot of people that talk about remedies and karmas, and the greatest karmas that we can create are when we refuse to speak up for those that are suffering and those that are vulnerable. We have a duty to our family and humanity to protect each other, to care for each other, just like you'd want somebody to do for you. We cannot let this be the state of our world. We cannot let this be a reflection of our future. We cannot let leaders who are greedy overlook humanity and doing what is right. We must speak up and we must continue to demand for a ceasefire in Gaza. I will be posting links in the bio of places that you can donate as well. Again, I strongly encourage you to please read about what is happening and please continue to speak out. Please continue to demand a ceasefire and international aid to Gaza. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. I hope, if nothing else, this offered you a different perspective. I hope I was able to offer you some sort of education. I'm very grateful for you to spend this chunk of time with me. I hope you're keeping well. I hope you're keeping safe. And until next time.